Tinker Greenwood by Paul McCann. Jimmy was a tinker who roamed around from pillar to post in the city and country alike. He had a horse and a cart from which he sold fresh buttermilk from an urn and sharpened knives and scissors from an old grindstone on the back of his cart. He often collected old rags and scrap which he sold to the merchants around Greenwood. When things took a turn for the worst, Tinker sold the horse and cart, and then he became a poor beggarman. Now and then he was able to get some work as a handyman and fixer of things, but for most of the time Tinker Jimmy scraped out an existence selling shoelaces from door to door. Sometimes he plucked his dinner out of garbage bin and slept at night and anchored boats around the low dock in Greenwood. Most of the sailors knew Tinker Jimmy and gave him no grief, but some of the local people hurled abuse at Jimmy. After a while he grew sick and tired of being a target of abuse and decided to get himself away from it all. One very wet and cold December, when the snow had turned into sleet and sludge, Jimmy shouted out to the city streets, "I'm fed up with your anger and hatred, so you can keep it." Nobody answered back, and Jimmy just wandered off towards the high section of the harbour. He arrived at the harbour master's office and was about ready to throw himself into the tide when he caught sight of a huge passenger ship that approached. And at that very moment Jimmy was inspired. He waited for a while in the silent shadows of the docks until the ship was safe and settled at the harbour. Then he sneaked on board, and he found a hideaway spot inside a lifeboat. He pulled back the thick green tarpaulin sheet that covered the lifeboat, and he huddled himself up into a ball. After a few days, the hunger grew, as did his curiosity. He knew that they were at sea, but wasn't sure if it was day or night. The tinker lay there in the small puddle that lined the base of the lifeboat, and the cold winter chill made him shiver for most of the time. After a while his fingers and feet burned with chill, and then they went numb. He thought about making an escape on deck for some food and waited until it was quiet. Then as he peered from the covers, he saw it was twilight, and beneath the feet he pushed out into the fresh air, and he breathed in. Leaving behind the lifeboat, he wandered down the deck, and the smell of food cooking wafted up his nose. Jimmy the Tinker decided to grab a bite to eat, and calm as you like, he walked into the kitchen and he took an empty plate and put it on a tray. And he walked over to the cook, who was busy at the stove, and he said, "I've been on board for 3 days. I could use a feed." The tinker held out his plate before the cook, who placed potatoes and gravy and a few slices of roast meat, and then he looked into Jimmy's eyes and he smiled. You must be one of the new hands. I haven't seen you here before." "Yeah, I'm new, all right." "I'm sure you'll be wanting to get that food into you now. Go on then." "Thanks." "Oh, thanks. No. I don't know how to say. I appreciate the food," said Jimmy. Hey, new hand. What do you call yourself?" "Tinker Greenwood's the name. What about yourself?" I'm the Captain Tinker. But you can call me Jack. Off you go now. Go and eat." Tinker returned to the lifeboat and he polished off the plate in seconds. And the next day the ship's engines roared, and Tinker heard the shouts of some of the crew, and he realised that the ship was slowly docking, and soon came the sounds of the city. The big wheels were turning, and the cranes and the trucks were churning and grinding. Tinker Jimmy waited until the night and the right moment before making his flight for freedom. And the ship's passengers, they had already disembarked, and now some of the cargo was being unloaded. Tinker slipped away unnoticed, as most of the crew were too busy working, heaving and hauling to see him skip off the ship. Within minutes he had found the streets of this strange new port. Still a little weak on his feet, Tinker stumbled and he fell, and he hit his head first on the main street of the village, and slowly getting to his feet he continued to walk along the footpath when suddenly a young man ran past, fast pace, the other end of the street coming towards him, and Tinker tried to get out of the way, but he stumbled again and fell. Unable to avoid the Tinker, the young man tripped over him and also fell, and banged his head on the concrete street. Tinker stood up and he looked down with horror as blood poured out of the young man's head. Hey, you! An angry voice screamed. Me, sir? Said Tinker to the man who approached. Yes, you. It wasn't my fault, Tinker tried to say, but the man seemed oblivious to the comment and even a little elated as he grabbed Tinker's hand and he started to vigorously shake it. Did you bring this man to the ground? Why, yes, sir, I did, replied Tinker. Tell me, my friend, what is your name? Tinker Greenwood, sir, said Tinker, a little perplexed. Tinker, may God bless you. And here, I want to bless you. The well-dressed man went through his pockets of the unconscious man's coat, and then he found a large envelope, and opening it, he produced a large wad of banknotes. Take this, my friend. Handing over a large sum of money to Tinker, the gentleman said, As I left my business just a short time ago, I was robbed by this scoundrel. The money he took was for me to pay the shipment of jewels that came upon the ship of the harbour, and I can never thank you enough. Tinker stood there amazed and stunned as the man hugged him and filled his pockets with gold coins. Finally, the well-dressed man took the small black bag from the thief's hand, and opening it up, he poured a cluster of diamonds and counted out a large number of these before returning them back in the black bag. He turned to leave, and just as he did, he gave the thief a kick in the backside, and he smiled at Tinker, and he said, I'm on my way to take care. Good man, and may happiness be yours always. Tinker stood there in silence, with tears of joy flowing down his face. He thought deeply for a few moments, and then he walked back slowly towards the ship on the dock. He asked to see the captain. Before long the captain came, and as he did, Tinker handed over some of the cash from his pocket, and he asked the captain if he could pay for his journey back to Greenwood, and for his kindness Tinker offered the captain a dinner out with him on the town that night. That evening, that was very special, because not only did Tinker and Jack have some great food and drink, but the restaurant was owned by the well-dressed man who had rewarded Tinker previously before. So Tinker had nothing to pay for the entire evening. The journey back to Greenwood was smooth. On return to the familiar streets of Greenwood, Tinker went into the bank. He stood in the queue, and he could feel the eyes upon him, and could hear the sniggers and the jeers. When it was Tinker's turn, the bank teller looked and said, we don't want any shoelaces today, Jimmy. Some people started to laugh, but that soon stopped when Tinker produced his newfound wealth and asked to open an account with the bank. Everything had now changed. The teller swallowed his pride in his throat, and Tinker watched people spilling out the front door into the street. Those that remained in the bank watched as Tinker took bundles of notes from his pockets. Would you take some of this and account, please? Would you like a credit facility, sir, with that account? We have many plans for our valued customers here, and we hope to help you in every way possible. After a moment's silence, Tinker said, Don't you worry about any of that sort of stuff. I have a plan of my own. What is the name you would like to have the account made into? Mr. Greenwood. You can just make it out into my name.
And whenever I need any of your services, you'll be the first to know. My accountant will be in touch with you very shortly.
When Tinker left the bank that day, he had a smile that stretched right across his entire face. With his newfound fortune, Tinker produced a rope-making factory that boomed into one of the biggest businesses that Greenwood had ever produced, and from that day Tinker invested very wisely, and in a short period of time was one of the wealthiest men in the country. After Tinker became Lord Mayor of Greenwood, he married a millionairess, and life was good. Everyone spoke highly of the Greenwoods, who were the owners of the majority of businesses in the entire country. The end.